Have you ever launched something, whether it's your business or your podcast or a product, and then after you've launched it, you've had this sinking feeling like, ooh, what if someone copies this? Or worse, what legal step did I forget? If you've ever Googled, do I need to trademark? Or how do I protect my business name? Well, this episode is for you. Welcome to Rocky Mountain Marketing. I'm your host, Katie Brinkley. Join us as we dive deep with the world's leading digital marketing experts every single Tuesday. It's all about giving you the strategies that are working right now, directly from those who are making an impact. With my 20 years of experience, I'm here to help you navigate the world of digital marketing. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills or transform your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started on today's journey to success. Welcome back to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. Today's guest is what I'd call a startup founder's secret weapon. If a story started with an engineer, an attorney, an MBA, and an entrepreneur walking into a room, well, it would end with Jeff Holman. That's today's guest. Jeff is the founder of Intellectual Strategies, a law firm that's changing the way startups and growing businesses get legal support. He's helped founders solve complex business and legal problems for over 2 decades. Plus, he speaks fluent tech, law, strategy, which is rare. So today he's going to be walking us through the most common legal mistakes that first-time founders make and the steps that you need to take right now to protect your brand. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining me, Jeff, on today's episode.
Katie, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Jeff, you've worked with so many early stage entrepreneurs. And I think that one of the first mistakes that I've made, well, let's not talk about me. Let's generalize here. What's one of the
we
biggest
we could dive in there. That's a great place to start. Every founder goes through the same issues, right? We all pretend like we don't have them, but we all go through them, and we just go through them in a different order sometimes. So we could start with general, or we could start with what you've been through, because I'm sure what you've experienced, other people have experienced, and some other people are on the track to experience it if they don't take a different path.
Well, I think that's one of the most embarrassing things is we think that we're like, oh, I'm the first person to ever make this mistake. And luckily there's people like you out there that's, well, that's probably why you have a job. It's not the very first time that a lot of us have made these mistakes. So what are some of the most common legal missteps that you've seen people make when they're first starting out?
Okay, well, we won't start with yours because you probably haven't made any.
It might be me still too, but yeah.
No, I'll start with one that's really common. In fact, I saw somebody this morning. I was on LinkedIn looking at, my feed, and somebody got on there. They said, "Hey, I'm so excited to tell you, I left my last position. I'm launching a new startup. And the startup is for this type of service, and we're going to target these types of people. And it's called XYZ, right? We'll call it Pinky or whatever, right?" And I immediately did what I usually do when I see my friends starting these new businesses with these really, with these simple names. Totally fine. Sometimes that's the best way to go. But I got onto the USPT. Now he's not my client. He didn't hire me. I just was curious. And I said, I wonder if he's registered his trademark yet, right? Does he have that name? Does he have it reserved for himself? And I didn't, in a quick search, I didn't spend too much time on it, but real quick search, I probably would have seen it if he had got a trademark registered for it. So that's one of the biggest things that people don't do is they get all excited about the business, as they should be, right? Creating a product, creating a service, selling a service, closing sales, like that's the exciting part of the business. That's where you make your money. But behind the scenes, there are these legal things like protecting your name and your brand that you're trying to build value around. That's a really important part of it, and a simple step to take. But he hadn't done it, so I reached out. I'm like, "Hey, just FYI, you might want to consider this. Let me know if I can help." So that's probably one of the biggest for new people launching a business, especially where the business is about their brand, right? Either we see this a lot in like SaaS platforms where brand is a huge part of what they do. That's some play on words for the type of people they're serving, or whether it's, coaches and other service providers who are branding maybe kind of between their personal brand and the service that they do. Like, brand is a big deal for those guys. So if brand is part of your business, then protecting your brand should be part of the legal strategy that you implement.
So would you say that that's kind of like the maybe the legal blind spot that ends up costing founders a ton of money later?
It definitely can, right? All of the legal issues that we talk about here, and this is the hard thing about it, right? They all have the potential to become huge issues. They don't always become huge issues. Like he might have picked a name that's just fine and nobody will ever copy him and he won't run into issues of infringing somebody else. That might be the case. And we see these kind of mini success stories all the time. And so we kind of feel like, well, they all did it. I'm just going to do it the same way. And you might be fine and you might not. But when you're not, that's the problem, right? In fact, I listened to, I don't know, it's probably a social media clip or something. Is his name, is it Alex Honnold? Is he the death defying, rock climber out there? They had a movie made about him recently. He
Oh,
was,
yeah,
you
I
know what I'm
don't
talking
know who
about?
that I
Anyway,
know who you're talking about, but I don't know his name. Yeah.
he was talking about rock climbing and he said, think about risk. He thinks about risk differently. Risk is all about how likely is this to happen, right? It's not about the consequence, because in my case, the consequence of making a mistake or something going wrong is almost always death. But the likelihood of it happening with my experience and where I'm going and knowledge, like it's really low likelihood of happening. That's what a lot of legal things are. Some of them are really low risk that they might happen, but if they do happen, they can be kind of business killing experiences. That's the hard part about legal.
Yeah, and I think that what is one of, like, the most common I'm doing air quotes, like, "I wish I would've known this earlier," moments that you've come across?
Oh, yeah. I think if we're talking early stage starting a business, one of the most common things is just putting the right terms in place with you and any other founders that are on your team.
Ooh, let's talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who, in fact, I've got a client who came to me unfortunately after the fact, and they basically said, they started this business. It's done really well. I look at what they make it monthly and I'm like, took me a long time to get there, but they're new and they're doing a great job. Three founders. A year in though, one of the founders said, "Yeah, I'm done helping out." And the other two founders are like, "Well, are you leaving the business?" He's like, "No, I'm going to keep my ownership, but I'm kind of done helping out." And so, a lot of founders don't think through what happens if things don't work out one way or another. And I see this a lot with founders. They're friends, things click really well. They don't really plan for what if something goes wrong. And so they don't have any, in fact, I've read several, like, if we're getting really technical, LLC operating agreements that all say we're just going to decide everything unanimously. That's awesome, except when you don't agree anymore, when one founder wants to not work but still keep her ownership and still get paid, you've obviously hit a moment where you don't agree and you can't agree because the business might not survive that way. But you have locked yourself in with kind of some dumb language in your operating agreement that you put together for the ideal scenario, not for what is realistic or what might happen, even if it's remote, right? So having these founder disputes can really be killer to businesses, unfortunately.
And I think that with AI, you're probably seeing that kind of really pop up a lot now with bad, quote unquote operating agreements that maybe a AI put together. And that now you're like, this was not done correctly. Have you seen any of that come through yet on your desk?
Yeah, oh, definitely, definitely. I have a lot of people who say, I already did this. I already drafted these documents. And I love AI. Don't get me wrong, right? I love it when it's used for the right purpose. I don't love it when people, because AI, put really broadly, just goes out and grabs the most average of content that it can find and sometimes builds new content around average content. And it's all directed towards the prompt that you put into the chat to begin with. So unless you're putting the right prompt in, it's going to go grab the average content that is probably wrong for you. And that's the real problem, right? The real problem is not knowing what questions to ask to get the right prompt. I think if everybody knew how to Like we need AI, some different version of AI. We need AI to really help people build their prompts out so that then AI can answer the right prompt. Because until we have the right prompt, we're not getting the right answers. And and AI doesn't know that it's wrong. It wouldn't tell you that it's wrong. It's trying to please you. If you point out that it's wrong, it'll be like, "Oh, you're so right. You're so smart. Thanks for the correction." But like, how do you know? You went to AI because you didn't know to begin with. So it's kind of
Yeah.
this circle of ignorance a little bit, if I can say that.
Let's break down the difference between a brand name and a trademark.
There's a lot of maybe branding elements, and I might use language a little bit differently than you would from a marketing standpoint, but we can come together on it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of assets that you might use for your business. You pick a name, you pick a slogan, you pick a logo, you pick colors, you put together your style guide, all that stuff. Some of those things are worthy of being protected by trademarks, right? And others, they're less valuable. They're probably good trademarks, but not something you necessarily want to spend money protecting. So having kind of an idea of what is protectable at the beginning is helpful. So I talk to a lot of founders about the two main criteria for being protectable trademark assets, right? Because if we step back, trademarks, IP in general, intellectual property contributes, if you look at some studies, contributes to like 85 to 90% of the value of a business eventually. Now they're talking about really large corporate entities out there, and that may not hold quite as true for really small businesses because revenue drives a lot of stuff. But IP eventually, if you're going to sell your business, someone's going to buy it, they're going to look at the value of it. IP is going to be a significant contributing factor. And that includes things like patents and trademarks. So that's why we're talking about it, right? You might as well be building a brand that can have that eventual value to it. And if you're going to do that, protecting with trademarks is important, and understanding what the criteria to get a trademark are, that's going to help you. So I don't know if I just laid the groundwork for that, but there are really two criteria, right? One, if you're protecting something, whether it's a logo or a name or even a color or a noise or a sound, which you can protect if you really wanted to, or a slogan, any of that stuff, if you're trying to protect your brand assets, you've got to meet these two criteria. One is there's a kind of a spectrum of descriptiveness. How descriptive or unique is your trademark relative to the brand, relative to the goods and services that you're selling? So if I'm a law firm and I go out there and call myself, legal services, that's totally generic. Nobody's going to let me have that exclusivity over those words for legal services, right? Just like, marketing agency, that's generic. So you've got to be something above generic or just merely descriptive, we call it. You need to be more unique, right? So if I called my law firm Intellectual Strategies. That's a phrase nobody uses anywhere. A lot of people use intellectual property and they use strategy, but nobody really says the phrase intellectual strategies. So it's a unique phrase, especially for a law firm, which normally they're named after people. You have to be more unique, and we can go into that more if you want. But that's just the first criteria. The second criteria is you have to be unique relative to other brands that are out there, right? If I wanted to call, I think, are you Next Step Social? Is that
Yep.
right? If I go in there
That's
and I'm
us,
like,
yeah.
well, I'm Next Step Marketing, or I'm Next Step Legal, and I'm going to go and sell to your same clients, you're going to be mad at me, right? In certain cases, you're too close. There's a likelihood of confusion. Consumers for your brand might be confused that I'm providing services related to your brand. And so you have to be unique relative to the competition, but also unique relative to the goods and services that you're selling.
So is there any sort of like grandfathered in with when it comes to trademarks or anything? So like, let's say, you've been working as intellectual strategies for the past 20 years, but somebody else comes in as intellectual strategy. Is there any sort of like grandfathered in?
Like, what happens? Like, this is a question that everybody asks themselves when they're like, I've been operating for 8 years and somebody just came into my market. Another tattoo parlor came in and
Yeah.
they started using the same artwork, or this happens. We get this question all the time. So there is an aspect of grandfathering. It's not called that, right? What we think of, and this gets into, I love to talk about layers of IP. So forgive me for a minute while I dive into that. But in intellectual property, including trademarks, you have all these different layers of things that you could consider, and they create kind of this fabric of protection for you. if you do it right. So one of these layers in trademarks is that if you use a brand in public for interstate commerce, we call it, but just think of it in public, then you have some rights that you've established just by using that brand. And we call those common law rights. It just means that courts around have historically said, we understand you're using this and we want to recognize that, and we don't want to let other people come in and take advantage of the brand that you've already built. Now, common law rights they just exist throughout the United States in the sense that you can use your brand wherever you want. However, if somebody comes in later and builds a bigger brand, they build a brand and they go get a federally registered trademark for their brand, and it's similar to your brand that you've already been using for 5 or 10 or 15 years, there's a possibility that they can supersede your rights everywhere that you're not already operating. So, I'm located in the Salt Lake City area. And if I had my law firm and I just had I actually have a trademark and I've, registered it as I think a lot of people should. If I didn't though, and somebody came in your example and started, they start a big New York law firm and they're like intellectual strategy, legal services, and they go get a trademark and I don't have one, they could potentially eclipse me and get the rights across the nation, except maybe a bubble where I still am able to use mine in the Salt Lake City or Utah area, but they could have priority over me everywhere else that I'm not already operating. So grandfathering in is a possibility, but it's, you can get, I call it bubbled in, right? You can get kind of constrained to a specific market or a specific territory if you don't have broader rights. So possible, not ideal, but it is possible.
Oh, man. So I think that and this is where I think that a lot of people are kind of leaning on AI, is because all of this sounds really intimidating and it sounds really expensive. You and I are having this conversation for free. And I'm like, man, I'm really lucky right now. Number one, what is Intellectual Strategies, your company? What are you guys doing to make legal more accessible? That's question number one.
So yeah, it's a great question. And I've worked, I worked with some big companies early on in my career, and I didn't love, I love the energy of small companies. So I've really created something deliberate. I went and I was at a big law firm in Silicon Valley, and then I went in-house for a little bit. And I just said, there's a better way to practice and deliver services. So we've developed what I call a fractional legal team. A lot of your audience probably has heard of fractional executives, fractional CMOs, fractional CTOs, all that, right? It's an individual who comes in usually at a high level in your business and is there part-time, but with full-time expertise. We're the same way, but because there is such a diversity of legal issues that every business deals with, regardless of your size, I just said, well, wouldn't it be better if we have a team and you can get the right attorney for the right problem at the right time, all within kind of one fractional team framework. So we do a fractional legal team service where we're just geared strictly towards startups and scaling companies to help them get through that stage and grow bigger. That's our solution to it. But you bring up a great point that there's a practical side to all of this. And it's really tough to get some practical advice from people who haven't been down that path before and don't necessarily know how to tailor their rock solid advice to maybe a little bit more of a sandy budget, if you will. So that's where people have to, I think the advice I would give to your audience if they're starting businesses is, number one step is determine what kind of business you want to build. If you're in this to build like I think of a lot of the trades, right? You're a plumber, you're a tile setter, you do something like that. Like, you can make a good business. There'll be demand for your services. You don't necessarily need to build out a whole bunch of legal infrastructure. You probably don't need to protect your brand name too much. You're just, you're a guy that does this, cover costs, you make good money, and that's what you want to build is a business that allows you to be the operator and make a decent living. There's a lot of those out there, and they don't typically run into too many legal issues that they have to have an attorney for. But if you're another type of person, you're thinking about building a bigger organization, a bigger brand, a bigger team. You want to launch something that's world changing. Like, you're now stepping out of this lifestyle operator mentality into this startup scaling company mentality. Like we're gonna scale this. We're gonna serve X number of people. Like you're talking about building a brand, and you should be talking about how, like internally with yourself or your team, how do we do this in a way that gives us freedom to operate our business over time? Because I use that phrase really deliberately, because I think of every business as having kind of three legs, right? You got when you're starting out, you got to validate that your technology works, and your technology might be the service or the product or whatever you want to be. I use that term loosely. Validate the technology. Then you have to validate your market, that somebody will buy your product or your service at a price that makes sense for you. And then the third leg is this freedom to protect the freedom to operate your business. That usually means you're getting kind of the legal guidance you need to keep yourself out of trouble and to keep yourself compliant. You're probably getting financial assistance to keep your business compliant with taxes and financially viable and tracking all that. So you've got these freedom to operate aspects to your business. They're not the fun part of your business necessarily, but if you're going to grow something larger than yourself, you really need to think about more than just the products and services you sell and who you sell them to. You need to think about what's the structure of the business and what's the foundation that'll support growth. And that's different than the maybe foundation that you need for something that's just owner operator. I hope that's helpful.
It's super helpful. So if someone were to walk in or sit down with you or someone from your team, what questions should someone ask during a legal consult to get the most value?
Oh, it's all going to be context driven, right? So we talk to different people all the time with they're building different things. And so what I would suggest, what I like to do, and in fact, I do a free 30-minute strategy call with all potential clients, right? You can get on my website and you can sign up today if you wanted to. And the strategy call, what I'll talk about is I'll say, where have you been? Like, what have you been building? And maybe you've got a few legal issues you already know about. I just want to know about those. Then I'm gonna ask about, where are you going? And that's where we want to spend our time. We want to talk about the business milestones that you're working towards, right? What's coming up in the next 12 to 18 months in your business? Beyond that, it's a little too far out, right? It's a little more speculative. But 12 to 18 months is kind of that time frame where you could say, well, yeah, I've thought about launching in this other market, like opening another office perhaps, or I want to bring on a VA, or I want to hire a couple employees, or I'm looking at funding for my business. So whether that's debt or, investment equity funding, like you can start to see pretty realistically what's happening 6 months, 12 months down the road. And those business milestones are going to drive the conversation so that we can sit down and say, with that type of business milestone, here are the legal things that are typically tied to that you should watch out for. And so I think from my perspective, the best thing I can do, the most value I can give somebody in a 30-minute, kind of introductory phone call is to say, be aware that these are the points in time when your business is doing things that legal issues could pop up. And here's how to think about those and maybe protect against those before they become issues. And if I've done that in a phone call with somebody, I think that's been very valuable. Because if we leave it up to the person, you said, what could somebody ask? I think we get back to like, well, if they knew what to ask, they could probably just use ChatGPT. The problem is they don't know what to ask. And so I try to guide that conversation and roadmap with them based on what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think for me, I do have multiple, like I have a COO, I have an director of operations. I've got a lot of other people here at the company. And I think that this conversation today allowed me to kind of really get a lot of clarity about different documents and different things that I need to have in place. So, I mean, like, what is one document that you think every founder needs to have in place from day one?
So I'm going to take the example that you just gave. If you're hiring employees, you're going to want one or two documents in place. I mean, probably more, but one or two to make it really simple. If you're hiring W-2 employees, you want to have an offer letter in place. And that offer letter is not an employment contract, and this varies state by state because every state's employment laws and rules are different. But you want to have an employment offer letter in place that outlines what the job is and what it isn't. And that's going to save you a bunch of headache for various reasons down the road when it comes time, for whatever reason, for that employment to end, right? So offer letters for employees are huge. Now, some people opt not to do W-2 employment. they opt for independent contractors. And that's totally fine, assuming that you meet the criteria for that. If you do that, then you need to have the equivalent of an offer letter, but it's an actual agreement. And I call it a consulting agreement or an independent contractor agreement. And that agreement, again, outlines just the different roles and responsibilities that somebody has. For example, if you're hiring, designers or software developers as independent contractors, and you don't specify in that agreement that you own the deliverables that they're creating for you, then in a lot of states, the default rule is that they own it. So even though you hired them specifically to design your logo or to develop your software app, they're going to own that unless they've already agreed that you're going to own it. So depending on who you're hiring, it's either an offer letter for employees or an independent contractor agreement for independent contractors. I would hope no business would go forward without those in place.
Yeah, that's really important. And I mean, I would assume that this goes even for people that are in Canada or overseas or.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So
anywhere you go, you would want to have something in place. I've hired people off of Fiverr. I'm a small business like a lot of my clients. There's 5 attorneys and 4 or 5 staff members. We do fine, and we're somewhat established, so we're not just starting out. But I still hire people from different places to help out efficiently, and I'm always
good work anywhere.
Yeah,
thanks
for sure.
to the internet.
Yeah, and I'm like, here's the working arrangement that we're going to be working under. So now I try to keep it simple. I don't want to send a 12-page document off to somebody doing a $100 project for me. So I really strive to make it, easy for people. But it's important to do that regardless of where they're at.
Well, Jeff, this has been an awesome conversation. You mentioned in passing, and I hope everyone picked that up, that you do give a free 30-minute consult to potential clients. I mean, so tell people more about that. Tell people where they can learn more about you, connect with you. Tell us all the things.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. If people are there, you're welcome to link up with me. If you shoot me off a solicitation to set up a 15-minute call right off the bat, I probably will not do that, but glad to connect and stay connected on LinkedIn. And then, like, as you mentioned, anybody who is looking for legal help in an area that we can help with, I do a free 30-minute strategy call. And so people can go to my website. It's intellectualstrategies.com. You can see my calendar and you can pick a time. And I love talking with people who are creating new things. A lot of our clients are innovators, either innovating new products, platforms, or brands. So we do a lot of e-commerce and SaaS and other service providers who are kind of empowered with tech. And so, I love talking with people, hearing the stories, seeing where they're at, giving them a little bit of guidance. I feel like that fulfills one of my purposes, which is the thing I've adopted myself is to help other people innovate with confidence. And so I feel like having a little bit of legal guidance along the way, even if it's in a free 30-minute road mapping session with me, that's fulfilling that purpose for me too.
Awesome. Well, your business is worth protecting, right? And you don't want to wait until something breaks to build the foundation. Jeff, I can't thank you enough for joining us on Rocky Mountain Marketing today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. I hope you're leaving with valuable insights and the inspiration to lead your market. If you've enjoyed our time together and found today's podcast episode useful, I have a small favor to ask of you. Please hit that subscribe button to stay updated with the latest episodes. And if you know someone who could benefit from these episodes, maybe a fellow business leader or an aspiring entrepreneur, go ahead and share this episode with them. Let's spread the knowledge and grow together. Also, I'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation beyond the podcast. Visit me at katiebrinkley.com to connect, to find more resources, or just to share your journey. And be sure to pick up your copy of my new book, The Social Shift, at katiebrinkley.com/book. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Katie Brinkley, and I can't wait to dive into more strategies and stories with you on the next episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. Let's keep on taking your marketing to new heights.